Hi everybody, welcome to EHR 706 Work Health and Safety. My name's Allan. I'll be the teacher with you for this study period. I've had a long association with Griffith, having studied there as an undergraduate in the 80s. I did my postgraduate studies and a PhD in the 90s. I then worked there for 12-14 years or so before going to government and working in industrial relations, in the health and safety area, in evaluations and also in research. During that time in government, I've always sort of kept a hand in doing a little bit of teaching to assist the department, and I think that my experience in government has really given me a much deeper insight into the sort of topics we're going to be covering. So I hope to share some of that experience with you in this study period. Let me tell you a little bit about the unit. Our intended audience. We're going to cover a bit about what your learning materials are. We're going to talk about how the modules fit together and your assessment. So that's what we're going to do here today. But before I go any further, I just want to make a terminological clarification. When people talk about work health and safety, they often use other terms as well, such as workplace health and safety or occupational health and safety. They all refer to the same thing. So if you see something different written down somewhere, you know they all refer to work health and safety. So let's talk a bit about the design of this unit, which I put together some years ago now. Basic logic is that health and safety is critically important, and for people who are working in the HR employment relations area regime, they're either managers or aspiring to be managers, and health and safety is going to be one of their areas of expertise. That's one of the things they're going to be responsible for. Now, when we put this unit together, we're very modest in our intended outcomes. We're not going to turn you into health and safety experts on the basis of one unit. To know everything you would want to know about health and safety, to be a real expert, you'd probably have to do degrees in psychology and ergonomics, industrial chemistry, industrial hygiene, mechanical engineering, and a range of other things. It's a very broad field, but people who are working in our field generally tend to be responsible for this. So we don't expect you to be an expert on it, but we understand you to just have a good understanding of the basics. And that's what we're going to do in this unit. We're going to be focused on giving you some practical skills, and we'll have assessment, which is an applied exercise in you trying to better manage work health and safety at your workplace. So you can choose the topics that are relevant to you. So if you're in construction, you'll pick something that's related to you. If you're in a government agency, you'll pick something that's relevant, whether it be workplace stress or whatever. So we've got assessment, which is practically applied, but we've also got options for people who don't have access to a workplace, so they won't be missing out either. So before we get started, it's a good idea to get out your paperwork, your unit outline and your study guide. You can pause this recording until you get them, and we'll go on from there. So the unit outline provides an overview of our four main modules. That's what we're going to be looking at. Managing work health and safety, the legal framework for safety, how we manage safety risks, and we're going to look at some of the specific work health and safety hazards. We've got our assessment, which lines up with these four main ideas. We'll talk about them in a bit more in a moment, but our assessment matches up exactly with them, so everybody gets to be learning across those four areas. Your learning resources, there's quite a few. There's 2 textbooks. Electronic versions are available for you. There's one in the Griffith Library which should be connected through the web page, through our Griffith at Learning site. They're very useful. They're really, once you've looked at the study guide, there you should be your first port of call. So I've put together a very short study guide which just summarises our main 4 modules, just gives you a very brief overview and orientates you to the materials. You've got additional resources on our Learning at Griffith site. I'll be making announcements every week about where we're at and what we'll be doing and what you should be doing assessment-wise, be giving you some assessment tips and also highlighting important events from, current events from the papers and whatnot. You've got some interactive discussion forums there, and you've got to do a number of those. There's only a limited number you've got to participate in, but they're accessible, and that's a chance for you to engage with some of the topics in a bit more detail, do a bit of research, and try and make a considered contribution to those discussion forum topics. I've also put together recorded lectures for you for all the modules, plus assessment. The main bits of assessment are in week 6 and 12, so there'll be separate lectures for each of those. Of course, you've got Griffith University Library. If you don't know your way around that, this is a good opportunity to learn how to do it, to be finding books, journal articles and the like to assist you. So let me just give you a very brief overview of what the main 4 modules of the course are all about. What's the basic logic? Well, the bottom line is that management's responsible for work health and safety. Full stop. Workers have responsibilities. They must behave reasonably, but at the end of the day, managers are the ones who decide what business they want to conduct, what the workplace looks like, what machinery and equipment will be inside, how it will be organised, what kind of jobs there'll be, what type of roles people will be undertaking, what types of training is required. Managers are responsible for building this work system, right, for engineering it. And all this happens before workers take one step into the workplace. So, given managers are responsible for building this work system, it's their responsibility for managing the safety risks that may arise as a result of this business or undertaking. So step 1, managers are responsible, and what we're going to do is talk about a systematic way to manage that using a work health and safety management system. So it's got 6 main elements, and we'll look at those in some detail in Module 1. In Module 2, we touch on the legal framework. Working in this area, you'll have a good understanding about the nature of sort of how legally bound this disciplinary area is. It's even more so with health and safety. You've got acts and regs and codes and guidance material. And what distinguishes health and safety from IR in general is that in health and safety, the regulator is trying to provide you with assistance on how to manage risks to safety. And in IR, they don't do that. They just tell you you've got to do certain things. You've got to, go through certain dispute resolution procedures. You've got to do certain things as far as bargaining is concerned. They set out some of the procedural rules, and then the parties are at liberty, right, to conduct their affairs as they see fit within the laws. In health and safety, the regulator gives a lot of practical and prescriptive advice about what to do if people are working at heights. What should you do if dealing with asbestos, or noises, or leads, or specific chemicals, and so on and so forth. So what distinguishes health and safety is that the legal framework not only sets out responsibilities for the actors, and what are the main roles, but also then provides practical advice about how you go about managing safety. And one of the learning outcomes we really want you to take away from this is learning how to find your regulator, to identify resources, so that in your future careers, when matters come up, and people are dealing with heat stress at work or bullying, you'll be able to go onto the website and find resources to assist you. Now, to manage health and safety risks, there's a general risk management procedure which gets used in a whole range of different settings, but it's used with particularly good effect in health and safety. It's got 4 main steps of work out what our risks are, try and assess them and prioritise which are the most important ones for us to address straight away, and then our 3rd step is to put in place controls. This is a big takeaway point from this unit, is that we can put in place controls to either eliminate the possibility of harm or eliminate or minimise it as far as reasonably practicable. Some control measures are very effective, others are less effective. There's basically a hierarchy of control measures. So we'll learn how to use that, what they are, and that'll give options as to how you might best think about managing particular risks at the workplace. Of course, with any procedure, you've got to have a review component. It's time to stop and think periodically and have a look. Is what we're doing working? If not, what do we need to do to fix it? Now, what are we going to be managing? Well, there's a wide range of specific hazards. There's all sorts of ways of classifying them. This is one way of doing it. Physical, chemical, ergonomic, and the rest. As I said, you could probably do several degrees to get on top of all this stuff. We're only going to do it in one module, so I'll give you a brief overview of these things, but you'll have an opportunity to drill down into one or a couple of them, depending on what assignment you do, and then you can see how best you can go about managing particular hazards, using the risk management procedure and the resources available to you through the regulators. So you're not going to know everything about all these things, but you are going to know a fair amount about 1 or 2 of them by the end. Ones that relate to you, that are relevant to you. And so by learning how to do it, you can then apply that knowledge in other areas for other hazards later in your career. Your assessment involves your participation in the discussion forums, and there's details about that in the unit outline, so you can have a look there. But your main assignments are written pieces of work, where you can either do an applied project by writing some management briefs for your organisation. These briefs are only very short, they're only 2 pages. And you've got to do 2 for week 6 and 2 more for week 12. So that's really only 8 pages. Not a lot, but it's going to be a good test to see if you can condense your understanding about particular topics, fit them into short briefs, and attach appendices for important things you think should accompany your briefing papers. Using briefs is an essential skill when you're working in management and you're reporting to senior officers, and how you want your people to report to you. Very briefly, very succinct, nailing down the main points, no waffle. How do we proceed? What are the issues? How do we proceed? So learning this skill is very useful for your future career. If you don't have a workplace, you can do the other option, which is where you're basically doing an essay. It's like a little literature review. We'll call it an information paper, and these are often generated in organisations. I've included one that I've written, which was a research piece about what are the risks to safety in construction in Queensland. And there I went through and reviewed the literature and the secondary data, I also got some primary data from workers' compensation, and I ran all the numbers and did all the things and tried to identify who was at risk and what was causing the problems and what's happening with trends and all that. But organisations of all kinds, unions, employer associations, industry bodies, governments, big employers, get short papers written about important topics. They don't normally include recommendations, do X, but it does alert people to about important topics, and they may wish to go from there to consider their options and maybe develop strategies on the basis of this kind of basic research. So that's your other option. 2 papers, one in week 12, one in week 6, one in week 12. Same timeline as the management brief reports. There's in your assessment section, there's assessment criteria document with some general advice about your assessment criteria and a bit of general advice about doing assignments. There's in the assessment folder. There's also some examples there of I've written an example of a brief and some instructions of how to write them, and there's also an example there of an ACTU information paper to just give you an idea, the flavour of the sort of things we're looking for that second assessment option. So you've got your study guide, which is just a short overview of each of these modules. What are your main learning objectives? What are the readings? What's the topic about? And normally some sort of activity. So as you move into each of the modules, start here with the study guide, and that will orientate you to what's happening before you turn your mind to the textbooks. So that's my general advice for your learning strategy. Find out what your assignments are, okay? How are you going to handle them? Which ones you're going to choose? Look to your study guide for a general overview. You've got your textbooks there to support you and give you much more information. I'll put some mini lectures up for you of each of the modules to give you an overview and orientate you to the materials. And then of course you're going to be gathering additional information for yourself, whether that's journal articles or you're going to be gathering information from your own organisations. So mini lectures is introduction, that's this one each for the modules and one each for assessment due in week 6 and week 12. So that is our general overview to the unit. I wish you all the best with it. If you've got any queries, just email me directly. All the best.